William Moulton Marston said, "Wonder Woman is psychological propaganda for the new type of woman who should, I believe, rule the world. There isn't love enough in the male organism to run this planet peacefully. Woman's body contains twice as many love-generating organs and endocrine mechanisms as the male." Wonder Woman was Professor Marston's most famous creation, a superheroine designed to illustrate his disc theory. Not many people realize that Wonder Woman, as originally conceived, was a BDSM character, reflecting Marston's BDSM inclinations. J. Michael Straczynski wrote, "When I saw Wonder Woman being constantly put in positions where she'd get tied up with her own rope or held hostage, even as a kid, my reaction was, come on, she's too smart for that." Straczynski didn't get the point. The whole purpose of Wonder Woman was to get tied up, restrained, handcuffed, blindfolded, held hostage, and disciplined as befits a BDSM heroine. Everyone knew she would come to no harm. Marston said, "When a lovely heroine is bound to the stake, comics followers are sure that rescue will arrive in the nick of time. The bound or chained person does not suffer even embarrassment." Mindy Newell wrote, "Bondage, i.e., idyllic submission, is a common theme in early Wonder Woman stories. In nearly every one, she is tied to a chair, or forced into a straitjacket, or manacled and fettered, or chained, or gagged or caged, while her fellow Amazons, when they appear, engage in wrestling and bondage play. And while we all know about Diana's golden lasso of truth, which she was not above using as an instrument of bondage against her enemies, did you know that her belt is actually the Venus girdle, Marston's allegory for his theory of sex-love training, i.e., embracing submission through eroticism? Marston believed in female submission, calling it a noble practice, and was not shy about its sexual implications. Marston said, "The only hope for peace is to teach people who are full of pep and unbound force to enjoy being bound. Only when the control of self by others is more pleasant than the unbound assertion of self in human relationships can we hope for a stable, peaceful human society. Giving to others, being controlled by them, submitting to other people, cannot possibly be enjoyable without a strong erotic element. Wonder Woman breaks the bonds of those who are slaves to evil masters. But she doesn't leave the freed ones free to assert their own egos in uncontrolled self-gratification. Wonder Woman binds the victims again in love chains. That is, she makes them submit to a loving superior, a beneficent mistress or master, who in every case represents God or goodness or Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Freedom usually goes through a stage, as in progressive education, where it becomes detrimental through lack of discipline. Jordan Peterson says that if you want to change the world, you should first clean up your room. According to Marston, discipline is the key. You need to learn discipline and love being disciplined. Marston was a sadomasochist with a penchant for bondage. Wonder Woman was his fantasy woman. Marston's outre tastes were part of Wonder Woman's DNA. Superheroes are a funny bunch in general. Batman has the definite feel of a psychopath. Spider-Man is a teenage weirdo, a stalker. Superman must have the biggest shadow ever, and he's a fricking alien. Every superhero has a super weirdness as well as a superpower. Maybe the two always go together. In BDSM, a submissive is happy when they find a dominant, an authority they respect. Then they willingly submit. With a dominant they don't like, they merely comply, and the relationship soon fizzles out. By the same token, the dominant is content only when they have a genuine submissive to deal with. They are rarely interested in mere compliance, unless they are a disciplinarian dominant who specifically gets off on compliance rather than submission. A dominant and submissive enter into a kind of dance. The dominant is the one who, through their personal force of will and charisma, induces the submissive not just to comply, but to fully submit. They seduce the submissive, but the submissive seduces back in order to make sure that the dominant is just right for them. A submissive does not want to yield to a bad dominant, a dominant who is not worthy of being submitted to. Submissives want to submit to the true God, not any old god, not an imposter, not a false god. They deeply resent false gods. Donald Trump thinks he is Wonder Man. Trump has a worldview based on the simple binary of winners and losers. The rich are the winners and the poor are the losers. Trump's biographer Michael D'Antonio said, "Fred Trump thought his son should go out into the world and dominate. It's a particular view of life that Donald has carried forward. He thinks of it as a battle. He thinks of life as winning and losing and endless combat." Why did Trump refuse to admit he lost the 2020 presidential election? It's because he psychologically cannot acknowledge that he is a loser. He would rather accuse the American election system of being inherently corrupt, even though it made him president in 2016 despite the fact that he lost the popular vote, than admit that he was beaten fair and square by many millions of votes. He brought American democracy to the brink of collapse because of his personal psychological need never to be one of the losers, the people he has despised and mocked all his life. Trump said, "I have a winning temperament. I know how to win." The last thing Trump would ever say is that he knows how to lose, because that would mean he's a loser, not a winner. His dad would spin in his grave. It's strange the way an advanced nation can get caught up in one man's psychodrama. The same thing happened to Germany when Hitler came to power. His bizarre ideas, preoccupations, and paranoias became those of the whole country. Michael D'Antonio said, "Trump trusts himself more than anyone I've ever met to always be correct. And so the idea that he might be wrong is unacceptable and unimaginable, so he never is." Hitler thought exactly the same. He believed his generals were idiots and that he always knew better. Trump said, "Nobody knows the system better than me, which is why I alone can fix it." That's a man suffering from absolute self-delusion. It's extraordinary that such people can get to the top. Yet tens of millions of Americans willingly submitted to this man and believed him a messiah. The Old Testament reflects the violent masculine notion of power, divine freedom expressed through dominance, while the New Testament reflects the peaceful feminine notion of submission. Jesus Christ always comes across as effeminate, lacking all masculinity. It would be easy to imagine Jesus Christ as highly androgynous. The book The Sacred Virgin and the Holy Whore by Anthony Harris argued that Jesus Christ was actually a woman, suffering from a genetic abnormality that gave her a masculine appearance. In Jungian terms, Jesus Christ had terrible problems integrating his shadow and was undeniably anima-possessed. His masculinity, except in rare flashes, was absent. Jehovah, in the Old Testament, had even worse problems coming to terms with his shadow and projected it onto everyone. He was unable to acknowledge his anima in any way. Hence, his behavior was always psychopathically masculine. In many ways, Jehovah self-projected his anima and fell in love with himself. He was the supreme narcissist, a cosmic Donald Trump. So many Christians love Trump because he reminds them of their God, who suffers from the same psychopathic narcissism. They submit to anyone who is as insane as their God. They refuse to submit to sane people with sane ideas. You can't believe in the Bible without being a lunatic. It's a lunatic book crammed with lunacy. The Bible, with masculine domination in the Old Testament and feminine submission in the New Testament, is a BDSM manual. However, its BDSM lessons have never been properly learned and implemented. Christianity only makes sense in a dungeon and torture chamber. To convert Christians, you need to give them an even more thrilling BDSM experience.